and we will go live in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We've gathered on this beautiful fall evening to talk about a pretty heavy topic. So we're here to talk about Adulting 101 in the midst of a pandemic. Goodness gracious. So we want to say thank you to begin to the students who really brought this really important topic to us and said, you know, this is something that we're all kind of dealing with today, and we really want some wise counsel and great advice from some adults who are adulting. So we're going to do our very best tonight to impart some wisdom and guidance in the next hour. So we're going to finish at 8 o'clock tonight. I'll begin by introducing myself very quickly. So I am Locke. I am a 1992 graduate of Ohio University, Communication Studies. I also earned my master's in Communication Studies in 2018. I am currently the Director of Development and Alumni Engagement for Ohio University. And we've been challenged with a really difficult question by Dr. Lynn Harder. So I'll just quickly answer that prompt. And the prompt was, how has the pandemic impacted your life? Professionally, personally, give us a sense for what's happened. So I'll just quickly share with you that for me, I had to face my position being abolished. So it was mid-May when that happened. I had to quickly turn on a dime and kind of collect myself and figure out how to pivot to the next opportunity that I now have. And this was in the midst of my youngest daughter graduating from high school, and it was anything but a normal experience for her. So those are a couple ways the pandemic has impacted my life. So you kind of get the feel for what we're going to be talking about tonight. In a moment, my esteemed colleagues and very dear friends who serve on the Comms Alumni Council will each introduce themselves and will also share kind of their pandemic story. But first, I want to just say thank you. Thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. We know you have lots of options for what you could be doing on this evening. We know that we all kind of have a little Zoom fatigue going on. So we thank you for joining us tonight. We also want to say thank you to our leaders who we just love and adore, Dr. Lynn Harder and Dr. Karen Deerdorf. We also want to say thank you to the Ohio University Alumni Association, Colleen Caro and John Rogers in particular, who have been terrific in helping us create this, this evening's panel discussion. And again, thank you to the students. You know, you showed your bravery in saying this is a really important discussion. So we want to thank all of you. Also, very quickly, I just want to say that it's important that we all, I guess, come to this place knowing that we're here as Bobcats, helping other Bobcats, supporting one another, and with the very best and purest intentions. We're entering a judgment-free zone, a safe space, if that exists. I think Dr. Harder would say it's a brave space. So we know that, you know, we're all feeling some anxiety. So we're going to be expressing some things that kind of, you know, make us vulnerable. So know that this is a safe space for all of us tonight. So with that, I will hand it off to Katrina, Dr. Katrina Bell-Jordan, to start us off with introductions.
Thank you, Lori. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. My name is Katrina, and I am, interestingly, a 3 times Ohio U graduate, 1993, a Bachelor of Science in Journalism, and 1994 graduate of the School of Interpersonal Communication with an MA, and 1997 a PhD in Interpersonal Communication and Media Studies. I wear that 3-degree badge very, very proudly, along with my Bobcat pin. I currently serve as Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago, where I have been for the last 24 years. So my quick response to a formidable question is, in terms of the impact of the pandemic, I would say as an educator and higher education administrator, my entire professional life for the duration of the pandemic has been revolving around responding to the pandemic, being responsible for a 32 program college that had to transition to remote instruction last March, and that had to develop infrastructure to provide our faculty, staff, and students the resources and support they needed to maintain the curriculum that our students deserve, to be able to operate safely and continue to move forward amidst uncertainty in our world and in higher education. Personally, I similarly am the parent of a 2020 high school graduate and now college freshman who, like so many young people, is finding his way during the uncertain times that we all face. And it's impacted the way I thought I would parent in sending my child out into the world. It has made me braver, and I hope him stronger. So thank you.
Thank you. Miss Mary.
Good evening. Thank you, Lori. My name is Mary Bradley, and I am a native Clevelander, and I currently live in Cleveland, Ohio. I graduated from Ohio University in 1980 with a Bachelor of Science and a BSc in organizational communication. I minored in English and in business management. After 15 years in the private sector, I decided that I wanted to become an attorney, so I quit my job working for a major regional bank in Columbus, Ohio, and I moved back to Cleveland to go to Cleveland State University and receive my law degree in 1998. And I currently work for the U.S. Department of Labor as a government attorney, primarily employment and labor law. In terms of the impact of the pandemic on my work life, we've basically just been working at home. So depositions are conducted virtually. Hearings pretty soon will be conducted virtually. Meetings with clients, everything is virtual now. So, and all of my files are virtual as well. So I've adjusted. I didn't think that I would like it, but I'm loving it actually. And so you are flexible in how things challenge you in life, and you just go on with the next thing. So all is well here in Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you for participating tonight.
Thanks, Mary.
That's great, Mary. So I'll go ahead and jump in next. I'm Julia Cray. I am a 2003 grad. So I was HTC with a focus on what was at the time interpersonal communication and is now communication studies. And I did minors in political science and math, just for fun. And I packed up all my stuff right after I graduated and moved to DC, where I have lived since then. I think you can probably hear one of the impacts of the pandemic right now, and that is my senile dog, who really likes to get lost in the kitchen just when I have big meetings and things. But the other big impact is I'm the mom of a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so it is a very different thing to be trying to do a job. I'm a senior vice president at a marketing firm where we do communication support primarily for the federal government, a lot of stuff in public health. Right now I'm doing a lot of work on, for example, messaging around COVID vaccines and preventive care services that people should be getting. But then sometimes I'm in the middle of a call and I find out that my first grader got disconnected from the internet, which essentially means is no longer in school. And I need to turn on a dime and deal with that. I've also been trying to figure out what it looks like to maintain my friendships during this time when Zoom fatigue is real and there are only so many text chains I can reply to in any given moment. And so I've been thinking a lot about those things, and I'm really excited to be here and to be talking with all of you about them tonight.
Thank you. And Jeff.
So Lori, even though this is Adulting 101, I think my mom would argue I still have some growing up to do. So I might not be the best person for this panel, but so my name is Jeff. I graduated in 2006. I studied communications and journalism. And like Julia, after college, I packed up and went to Washington, D.C. I spent about 10 years in the public policy world in DC and then in Indianapolis, Indiana, before making the transition to corporate America, working for two manufacturing mobility companies, one Cummins, a diesel engine company, and now Honda. So I work at research and development arm of Honda. In terms of what the pandemic has taught me, both I'd say professionally and personally, is professionally since early March, have basically been in crisis communication mode as we switch the way we do business from a center with thousands of people at our R&D location, where we do everything from fabricating future vehicles to testing those vehicles. How do we move part of that business to an online world? And then how do we also maintain that business in a safe and healthy way for people whose essential jobs are on site? So that has involved many communications, long days, late nights over the past several months. But what it's taught me professionally is that find an employer that deeply cares about its people, because my employer, Honda, is one that has supported me and all our associates and all our partners greatly. Personally, as a single person who lives alone, it has taught me the importance of, frankly, love and relationships, and having people, whether it's your family or friends or even fellow alumni who have been there for me, and I think I've been there for them, to maintain those relationships in this strange environment. And so I would tell everybody who's listening, if you find yourself in that isolated space, feeling lonely, feeling that anxiety, please know that you do have a lot of people who love you, whether that's your family, your friends, or your fellow Bobcats.
Thank you. So you can tell we have a group of folks who are just absolutely devoted to Ohio University and to continuing to be involved in the work of the College of Communication. We represent a much larger group of folks who meet a few times a year and talk about ways that our alumni can continue to have a great impact on the college and the university. So I love being part of this group, and so proud of the esteemed colleagues that we have. So in a moment, I'm going to ask Katrina the first question, but before I do that, I want to encourage everyone to pose a question that is on their mind. I'm suggesting that you use the all panelists and attendees as a way to pose your question so that everyone can see what your question is. And if you don't feel like asking a question, we would encourage you to participate in other ways. You may feel like, yes, oh my goodness, I agree. Send us, a simple little comment or an exclamation point, and just let us know you're in the chat and you're participating in what we have to say here. Again, I'll just, remind everyone that we recognize this is a heavy, heavy topic, and this is a time of great anxiety. So know that we're coming from a place of encouragement and great care, and it's all about Bobcats supporting Bobcats. So this is meant to be a conversation, and I think Jeff kind of said it. We're all adults, but gosh, we have a whole lot to learn, right? And we'll be the first to admit that. So what we're sharing tonight is, observations, insights, based on our lived experiences and just time on earth. So with that, Ms. Katrina, I will ask you the first question, and that is, as young people are starting to enter a professional world that is mostly virtual, how can we foster workplace relationships?
Well, I appreciate Jeff's comment about still working on things, because I think I'm still working on this. It's a work in progress as the virtual world shifts and changes every day. But let me just say that fostering relationships, I think, is key at every level, and I don't want to understate that. But I think in the context that the question is coming from, I would emphasize that the real work is in this kind of continuation of cultivating those relationships, not just initiating them, but it does take time, like with any other relationship, to cultivate them. The real work, I think, is being intentional and investing in learning and understanding in the workplace the roles and work that your colleagues have. and ways perhaps that it's changed in the virtual environment. People often have a lot of experiences to share. Getting folks just talking about how their day-to-day calendar has changed and how their experiences have changed working in the work in the home space. I would also say not just trying to replicate in-person activities, but trying to participate or create new activities that increase social engagement behaviors and sustain kind of workplace community. So maybe you shy away from the social Fridays or the brown bag lunches, but creating new things that are ways that people can actually come and learn more about what each other's doing and don't feel necessarily burdened to talk about their family because they're already in their home, just things that can kind of recreate the work environment, but virtually. I think all while understanding that there's a kind of virtual exhaustion. I know we call it Zoom exhaustion, but I want to broaden it out to virtual exhaustion, and that there are simply limits to the time workplace colleagues really want to engage online. And it's not personal. We shouldn't take it personally. It's kind of funny to say we shouldn't take it personally, but there's just people who don't really want to necessarily socialize in that way online. So finding that balance, I think, is key. So again, that's not specific to young people. I think it's generalizable, and it's something that I struggle with as a supervisor, administrator. Do my staff really want to have happy hour Fridays after the end of a work week? Is that actually something that's, building community or another chore for them? So I hope that helps get the conversation started. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking about what that really, what that means if you're in your first job, right? Like, how do you actually do that? And a couple things that I have seen that have worked in where I've been are, one, setting up half-hour coffees with people. Just to say, hey, you're somebody I've heard really good things about, or I think our work might intersect, or I'm interested in the kind of thing that you want to do. Would you take a half an hour? And maybe I can't on a really busy Tuesday, but hopefully I can by next Friday. And having that kind of conversation, and then following up, our workplace uses Microsoft Teams. So we have that chat function and that kind of thing. So, maybe we had coffee and you send me a note later that says, it was really great to talk with you. I particularly was interested in this, and I'm going to go think more about that or whatnot. And then 2 weeks later, maybe you send a note that because you were browsing something and, hey, you mentioned that you had an old pug, or that you were interested in this with your work or whatever. And I saw this article or this cute picture of a pug or whatever it is and thought of you. That doesn't really require as much on the receiving end. But sort of is a, hey, I thought about you, I made this connection to you, let me throw this back out to you moment where you can sort of be engaging with people. And I think that speaks to what Katrina was talking about cultivation, right? So it's not just having the one coffee, but it's how do you find a really interesting article that made you think of that person and make those follow-up connections. And I think that's really true. I can see a lot of people are thinking about job hunting in doing that too, right? So having an initial conversation, but then following up to update, hey, hope you've been doing well. I've been doing this. I'm checking in on this, not twice a week, but every so often to stay in touch with people and to bring something to them that they might be interested in can be really helpful.
Thank you both very much. There's a lot going on in the chat, and I just want to say thank you because it's so awesome to see so many folks just jumping right in. Not a surprise with comms students, we can safely say. So just thank you for jumping in. I think I'll ask a question. I know there's a lot going on in the chat, but I'm interested in kind of the concept of de-stressing. And I know that's something that as a panel, you all have some opinions about. So I don't know if Mary or if Jeff, if you want to jump in, what are some of the things you're doing to kind of de-stress and, just thinking about mental health? What are some techniques that you might use to just, kind of stay centered, stay balanced?
Well, I'll jump in. The one thing that I did during this time is I added a virtual workout, and I established some goals. And so I've been working out 6 days a week. And that has done wonders for me. Not only have I lost weight, but I'm in really good shape. I have some muscles, but it's kept me from being stressed out. And I have a really high stress job, and I'm finding that I'm burning up a lot of energy and really being able to sleep better at night. So I'm more well rested. And so, and then I also incorporated some yoga. So just to, clear your mind, that's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, I actually just got off a run before I came onto the Zoom call. So very similar, put runs and stuff into the day. But I think, along those lines of, scheduling time for you, being purposeful about blocking that time off. I was talking to a friend today about how just these lines have become so blurred because we are stuck in our houses or stuck in our apartments, and suddenly your living space becomes your workplace, and it's hard to kind of turn that off sometimes. And so, whether that's, if I know I might have a late night, I block off 2 hours around lunchtime, I might get my run in then. And it's important, when you do something like that, don't feel guilty that you're going to do it, because that's, your time, you're reserving that for yourself. And so whether it's exercising, whether it's, disconnecting from the digital space and reading a book. I'm part of a classic book club. I'm the one this month. Finding that time to disconnect and just turn those things off. I mean, I'll be honest. Sometimes I get in mental overload when I have the TV on in the background, my computer's on, my phone is blowing up, and it's almost to the degree of I can't take this anymore. And so you disconnect to a degree and find that time for yourself, whether it's exercising, reading, or whatever it is that brings you joy.
I know Julia is like right on the edge of her seat because she has very young children. So I'm just interested, if you have a moment, what do you do to de-stress? My hunch is it's pour a glass of wine, but there may be some other things, right?
I didn't know we were allowed to say that. Sometimes it is. I think, I'm an extrovert. So I know, and my husband's an introvert. So I know that we need really different things, right? He needs a chance to get away and get to a quiet space with his Nintendo Switch and have a moment there. And what I need is a chance to get out of the house. And, thankfully my book club has been meeting socially distanced while it was still warm, on people who have, big back patios or roof decks on their apartment building, that kind of thing. Last night I played tennis until 11:20 at night, because by the time I left the house and the kids were in bed, it felt like I might as well just keep going. And I figured that February me would want to play more tennis. And so October me on a beautiful night should take a chance to do it. But I do think it's really important. I also have a list of I was having a really hard week one week, and I was like, okay, what do I need just to feel human? And I made a list to remind myself when I was having those other hard weeks, what do I need? I need to put in earrings. I need to buy myself flowers at Trader Joe's, where you can get an orchid for $8 and it'll last for 3 weeks. I need to drink water. The days when I'm so busy and I'm going back and forth between things that I don't have enough time to drink water, I feel extra depleted. So I wrote it down, and I made my list, the cheap, easy stuff that you forget when you're up to your eyeballs, so that when I'm having those extra big weeks, it can be okay, wait, what have I, oh yeah, no, I haven't had any water to drink today, and it'll help me remember.
Love that. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat. I don't know if you all have the chat open, but Caitlin is asking what I think is a really excellent question. As working professionals, what would be your advice to students embarking on the first steps in their career paths during this time? Do you have any tips to stand out in the remote job field? Yeah, this is certainly very challenging. So I don't know if any of you feel compelled to answer that question, but knowing that the majority of the folks I think listening into our conversation are students currently, and many of them are soon to graduate, what advice would you give them, when they're just starting out their career?
There's something about the end of the question that struck me. I think the students asked how might they stand out in the job market, and that prompted me to say very much the same things that you hope will stand out in the non-virtual world. Your ability to think about your self-presentation and how you interact and communicate with others. When you're face-to-face in an interview, you have very short kinds of interactions with a lot of people. There's transitions, you're interacting with the person that's walking you from meeting to meeting. And in the virtual space, you will have very similar interactions, transitions between Zoom sessions and things like that. And so I would say, I don't want to be coy and say, present a good personality or show your personality, but I think revealing aspects of yourself in the same way that you would do in those short conversations as you're interacting with folks informally in a job interview, I think you should make sure to use those opportunities so there's no dead space, if you will, between Zoom sessions, that you engage with the person that's invited you to the meeting, talk a little bit about yourself, ask them about their self. You learned a lot about an organization by the folks that take you from place to place. So I would try to remember the things that are common in an interview that's on Zoom that are very much the same in face-to-face, and use those opportunities to show a little bit about your personality and your interests and show interest in what others are doing. So that's just a little tip. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and if I can add, Julie,
nope, you go.
Maybe even think about, so Katrina's absolutely right in terms of, treat it as you would a typical interview in terms of how you present yourself, presenting that best version of yourself, but even think about the ways that you have maybe grown and responded to this crisis as well. And, there's a very good chance that your first job could be virtual. You could be working from home. And that is a very interesting transition, whereas, many people start their jobs, walking into that office and getting that training. That might look different for you. And so, you might get questions of, how do you think you would adapt to a new job in this virtual space? And to a degree, you can't necessarily speak to that because you've not had that experience yet, but a way that you could positively speak to it is, how have you adapted to the educational environment in this virtual space? So, how have you adapted to online learning? How have you maintained your studies? How have you, maintained your GPA? So, with all the challenges that you have been presented with this year at OU, how have you used those to adapt and grow as a person? And that will be a window into how you would do the same for an employer.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm actually doing, helping with a job hunt right now for my company. And I think, so I've been dealing with candidates for the past couple of weeks. And I think one of the things, being human is like really okay. And I think it can be so hard when you're starting out and you want to present this like perfect, slick, like vision of yourself in this job interview. And, to Katrina's point, you hear somebody's dog barking, ask like, oh, your dog, what kind do you have? I grew up with labs too. Or, like it doesn't need to be oversharing. And but maybe you're talking to the person and you say, oh, Katrina, that pin is really shiny. What is that? It looks lovely. And it's finding those ways to engage, to share a little bit about yourself. And then one of my biggest tips for folks who are job hunting is true COVID or not COVID, which is figure out how to use the networks of the people that on LinkedIn. So I remember everybody would be like, DC, it's all about networking. It's all about networking. And this was pre-LinkedIn when I came to DC. And I was like, well, I don't know anybody. Like, how do you network if you don't know anybody? I think it's a little bit easier now because you can start to get to know some people and, you have a good interview. Maybe you don't even get the job, but connect with them. Or it's, your friends of your parents who are in different companies or people that you meet through things like this who are in different places. and then use their networks. One of the easiest things for me to do when it comes to helping people who are just getting started is to have somebody come to me and say, hey, you seem to know this person who works at this organization. They have this job that I want, and I just sent this resume for it. Would you send it on to them and put in a good word for me? Sure. That's super easy. It gives me everything I need to do. I can like handle that in 5 minutes in between other meetings. And it makes it really easy to help somebody. And so, you know, when they've done that work and they've looked at my network and they know who I know and, you know, have it all ready to go, you know, doing that kind of thing to start to build those branches is going to be incredibly helpful.
If I can just build on that real quickly, Julie's absolutely right, because since we both have DC experience, the way I got to DC was I saw a Bobcat posted a picture on Facebook of his condo, and I thought, how is that Bobcat living in there? Because I know the Bobcat, and I thought, how? Because it's so expensive. And I contacted the Bobcat, and I said, how do you live in DC? And he said, well, basically what you do is you get roommates, you find a place off Craigslist. I don't know if it's that same way, but you find a place off Craigslist, you get random roommates, and you make it work. And that would, to Julia's point, that wouldn't have happened had I not reached out to the person. And I'm a big nothing ventured, nothing gained kind of person. The worst that can happen is they say no or don't get back to you. But the best that can happen is you have a new relationship that you might be able to, you know, maintain for years, and who knows where that could lead, and it could benefit both of you. So,
well, hey, I married my roommate from when I moved out here from DC. So, I mean, you don't know.
Benefits. So I want to pivot for just a moment and talk about kind of how to separate work. And Jeff, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but you know, work is just kind of melding into our homes, our personal life. And any of you, maybe Mary, you want to jump in. How do you stay organized? How do you create some sense of separation between the worlds? What does that look like kind of day to day?
Well, originally when I was sheltering in place, I found myself working entirely too many hours, and I just didn't know how to cut it off. But now I literally have decided I'm ending my day. I'm going to start at a certain time, and 8 hours later, I'm stopping work. And I literally, if I'm in the middle of something and I look at the clock, I will wind that up and I'm done. And another thing that I do is that I have a planner. So everything is in the planner. So I plan my personal time as well as my work time, you know, any meetings I'm going to have for work. And then what I'm going to do in my personal life is also on the planner. And then that way, during the day, when I'm working, I'm reminded that, you know, at a certain time, I have other things going on in the evening or even on the weekends. And so it's purposeful that I just make sure that I'm including myself in the things that I'm doing, and that it's not just all about work. So I plan it, I plan activities and events, and I write them down, and I stick to the plan. That's it. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. I have like a top 5. I'll make them really quick, and but this is really difficult in this current moment, and I'm going to admit that I'm still a work in progress on these as well. But it may seem obvious to say to designate a physical workspace or go to spaces that where you don't have where you don't do work. It's probably one of the most obvious things people say, but it's not just designating them, but I try to avoid them. I try not to walk in those areas of my house. It's kind of an exercise, because then you'll see something on the desk, you'll see that Post-it note, and it will remind you of something that you've left undone. If you are in a supervisory position, or if you, you know, have multiple jobs, I would manage my own calendar, building in transition time between meetings to make sure that you have thinking and planning time, and that you're not completely attending to the agendas of other people, which is really what your calendar becomes. And that's a pretty particular one. This one might not be as obvious, but designating transition time. So when you are commuting to work, whether it's a short commute or a long commute, you know, you have that shift that you make when you get into your car, or you get on the train, or whatever. But when you're in home, you don't necessarily have that time. So I tend to put on music or a podcast that's kind of transitional for me. That kind of defines my professional and my personal time to just kind of shift mental spaces. Really quickly, I would also avoid kind of setting up unreasonable expectations that you're going to, like, just because you're home, you're going to kind of empty your inbox every day. These things are unreasonable, and I think that then they kind of build up for us. And lastly, I would say, don't buy into the idea that, you know, you hear a lot that all the days are the same. And there's no such thing as the weekends because we're remote, right? Whether you work a Monday through Friday schedule or Tuesday through Saturday, recognize your time away, not necessarily your time off, because some jobs require us to be accessible on days where we don't officially work, but recognize that there are days when you have legitimate reason and opportunity to be off. And just please don't buy into that idea that, you know, every day leads into the next day, because, you know, that becomes a reality for us. So those are just kind of my top 5. I'm still working on them.
I have 2 to sort of build on that, Katrina. And, you know, I think you hear a lot about people who are trying to have their own workspace, and that is amazing. And I am betting that a fair number of the students on this chat are trying to job hunt from their beds. Or from their childhood bedrooms, or from, you know, an apartment that they're sharing with a bunch of people. And so I, in a very different way, have no ability to create boundaries between the first grader who is sitting across the table from me and the work that I'm doing. But I've done other things, like I have a tray. I realized my work stuff was like everywhere and it was too much. So I have a tray, and it fits like any of the papers I'm working on and the notebook that I need, and my water bottle, and my, you know, optical mouse, and my, you know, AirPod headphones. And I try and put everything back there when I'm done so that it's there and it's ready for me, and it's not all over the table where I'm trying to have dinner. And so I think, you know, for folks who are working from a bedroom in a childhood house, you know, thinking about how do you either carve out a corner of that room, or if that doesn't exist, you know, have your little tray or desk or something that you can set up that can help give you a sense of space differentiation, even if you don't have totally different spaces to do it in. So that was one thing. And then I had another one that was following up on what you said at the end, and I'm not remembering it at the moment. So we'll go from there.
I'll jump in real quick, and I'll say, absolutely agree in terms of those spaces, because I have a countertop that I work from, and I try not to work from my couch. It just creates that linkage, which I don't want, between personal and workspace. And like Julia said, when the day is over, I pack my stuff up, I put it away. I don't want to see it, to create that, again, that link between work and personal space. And to Katrina's point about the importance of commuting, I used to have a 30-minute commute both ways, and that was my karaoke time when I was singing in the car. I've lost that completely. So thankfully, I'm now back to, I'm going to work 1 day a week on Monday, so I get my karaoke time back for about 60 minutes while I'm driving.
And the chat reminded me of my thing while you were talking. So that's perfect. And it had to do with the unrealistic expectations. And for everybody out there who is job hunting right now, you can't do that 8 hours a day. Like it's not possible. It's not possible for anybody, even like full on been there, done that grown-ups. I've been unemployed multiple times in the course of my career. And I think that unrealistic expectation that should somehow be all you're doing, or that the only way to have that happen is to be doing it constantly, only sets you up for failure. So, you know, if that's the position that you're in right now, I would really think about carving out a set amount of time that you're going to be able to do that every day. You know, maybe it's 2 or 3 hours or something, and you're going to be like in it. You're going to be focused, and you're going to be following up, and you're going to be, you know, connecting with people you were going to do, and checking the job boards you were going to check, and then be done and put that down and come back to it tomorrow. Because job hunting is frankly nothing but an unending sea of rejection and terror and worry until it's over, because you have a job. And that will happen, and that's great. But in the meantime, like, it's okay that it's terrible, and finding a way to like take that weight of it and put it in a box that you come to every day, and that you do what you need to do to move through it and keep it going forward, and that you don't sort of let it sit on your shoulders for the rest of the time, I think is incredibly important.
I'm sorry, can I just say one quick thing on top of that? Because that's such a good point. I was unemployed for 9 months after I graduated. I was a mess. I thought, wait a second, I graduated, a job should have happened like that. What's going on? My sister, who's 3 years older than I, she said, you will find a job. And when you do, welcome to life. And so
and your career will be fine.
Exactly.
It will be fine.
Exactly. And so my sister said to me, try to enjoy this time while you have it. And I look back so regretfully that I didn't. I was a mess. I to Julia's point, I made it an 8-hour day, and I just stared at that computer, and I applied for things that weren't in my heart, that I wasn't meant to do, and it exhausted me. And I should have blocked out times to apply for jobs and then use that other time to focus on things that bring me joy. So great point, Julia.
Okay, so this was a hot topic. I'm looking at the chat now. There's a really great question, kind of comment from Allison. And gosh, there are so many more comments that we still need to get to. She's saying, I fear that when I graduate, I won't have enough on my resume since campus organizations and work do not present as many opportunities right now. So what would you recommend that we do while remote to remain strong candidates upon graduation? So what do you do when you can't be part of that student organization, or you can't volunteer like you might have, last fall? Mary, you want to jump in?
I was going to say that while I'm at home, I am still volunteering. I volunteer at the Legal Aid Society, and I would be involved in what's called, it just left my brain, virtual clinics, and so advice clinics. And because we can't meet with people face-to-face anymore, and we would meet with people in a community center, we're doing it virtually. So you can volunteer virtually and still interact with people in the outside world as well as within organizations. So I would find an organization that you have an interest in, or maybe you are already participating, with some type of a volunteer organization, and find out in what ways can you volunteer virtually. And that way it keeps you connected to the community. It keeps you involved, and it gives you a talking point during your interview to let people know that while I'm looking for a job, I'm also giving back. So that's something you may want to think about.
Anyone else want to jump?
I mean, it's hard, right? Like, there aren't a lot of easy solutions. We never had to do this, and nobody has ever had to do it before. So, it's fair that it's hard. It's fair that you're worried. I think knowing as much as you can the kind of thing that you want, and talking to everybody who knows and cares about you about who they know that might be able to help get you closer, or what conversations you should be having to do it. Using some of these resources that people are posting in the chat. You might not have as many internships, but you're still a Bobcat. And so that gets you doors open and access to people and that kind of thing. I also think it's really fair to say to people, I did this and this. I was planning to do this during my senior year. Turns out there was a global pandemic. And so what I'm really looking forward to is the chance to put these things I've learned in class into practice, to combine them with my passion and do this for you. And if are people out there who say, well, I'm sorry, you only had the one internship instead of 4 because there was a global pandemic, then they're not actually somewhere you want to work anyway. And so, look around, talk to the people that you have. And it's not making excuses to just recognize that this is hard and there are going to be fewer ways to get through it right now. But I also think, to Jeff's point before, right, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's going to be okay. and you're all going to have found a way to a career that's meaningful to you. And I know it might have a slower start or a different start. You might have to take something that wasn't as ideal or still back in your hometown or whatnot. But I think, one of the things I tell my kids all the time is that it won't always be like this. And I think it's really important to remember that, like, it's hard and that sucks. And it won't always be like this, and to just keep doing the best that you can.
I would say even find opportunities to do trainings online. If there's certifications in your field that you can pursue online during this period, pursue those. Even if you work in a field that we mentioned reading books earlier, but I'm really passionate about management issues. There's classic management books out there that I've read in my downtime, and so are there ways that you can try to improve yourself and grow in your work area while you don't have these internships? And in some cases they might actually be a little more advantageous. Sometimes some internships aren't the most rewarding in terms of the work that you're doing. And so while it stinks that you can't have that internship right now, maybe you use this time again to find that training, find that webinar, find that certification, find those books, those classic books in your field that you can absorb that information now and retain that later. And that will just put you a leg up, once we do get back to normal.
So Jeff, there's a specific question in the chat about books. So this is being asked by Katie. She's asking if there are any books that have helped you to accelerate your career, or have helped you to achieve personal life goals. What would you recommend?
Well, two. Stephen Covey, I think it's Stephen Covey, right? 7 Habits of, I think, Effective Leadership. It's on my bookshelf somewhere. I don't know if I get it. Stephen Covey, classic expert on management and workplace issues, basically taught me the value of, it's called the circle of influence and the circle of concern. That basically, there's big circle of things that you should be concerned about, keep on your mind, but there's small circle of influence or circle of control that you can control with your job and with your actions. And that's a way, it's really important during this pandemic, what we talked about earlier, not being overwhelmed with everything coming your way, is what are the things that you can control and focus on? What are things that you should be concerned about and mindful of, but focus on those things that you can control. So classic management book, I highly encourage that. Another one, little more kind of philosophical, was a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And this is getting a little heavy here. I'll make it quick, but Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. And he watched his whole family perish around him in Nazi prison camps. And Nazi prison guards even asked him, how did you get through this? They would actually come to him for advice. And he said, because the last thing that I could control that they couldn't take from me was my attitude. And so in all this, how can you focus on that thing that you can control, your attitude, and it will get you through it?
Laurie, can I just offer one more technical piece of a suggestion? A number of virtual conferences are being held. Many professional organizations are converting their annual meetings, and it's a great opportunity to not just learn about your discipline, but there's opportunities to get involved, to join working groups. So that's another way to go back to the student's question about ways to build experiences, maybe not internships, but professional development experiences more broadly. But it's also a way to spend time productively, to join virtual conferences. There's a lot of wonderful platforms that are making conferences feel very, very much like you're participating in person. That's just a suggestion.
Awesome. Yes. So we have a little less than 10 minutes left. My gosh, the time has flown, right? So we have lots of questions in the chat. So I'll just take a moment to say clearly, and we knew this going into this conversation, we don't have enough time to cover everything. So we want to encourage, I think every single one of the panelists have talked about, counting on your support system or creating your support system. So we want to encourage that all of you, that this is an ongoing conversation, and we're all Bobcats here to encourage you, our fellow Bobcats. So with that, Let's talk about moving to the next job. So how do you determine when it's time to move to another job, or if you've had to change jobs during the pandemic? I think Julia, you've changed. I've changed positions. How did you handle this?
So, I mean, when is it time to move to a new job? I think a basic thing is when it's draining you way more than it's giving you, right? Like, all jobs are hard sometimes. And whether it's dealing with personalities or work that is challenging or boring at either end of the spectrum, right? But I think, you'll start to know when the job that you're doing is beating you down, when you're not feeling as happy as you used to be, when you're dreading going into work. I hope none of you ever have that experience. I can't tell you the number of times that I have. So, you probably will. And sometimes even good jobs become bad jobs. I've had jobs that were great for years, and then leadership changed or something else external happened, and what was a really good job for a really long time for where I had been in my life all of a sudden was not the right fit. So I very much went through a very similar thing where I was job hunting, and then a pandemic hit. And they mailed me my computer, and I haven't seen any of my coworkers face to face yet, which is super weird. But I think, that's kind of my answer to when it's time to change. And I think, I've been doing a lot of the same things that I'm counseling you guys to do, and I started in April, and now we're getting some newer people. So when they start, I reach out for a coffee, and I'm like, hey, you're new. Guess what? I'm also kind of new. So why don't we talk to each other? And doing that kind of thing. I also saw a question in the chat about how you're, as you're doing this, because this is something that's been really relevant to me, how do you learn how to work with that new team when you're remote? And for me, it's been a lot of asking actual questions, to my boss. Hey, how do you want to check in? Do you want to do a half hour once a week kind of thing? Does something else work for you? Or, talking to my other colleagues, and being explicit myself about, if you can't get me on my computer, text me. That's what'll get my attention fastest when have a kid problem or whatever. Or asking other people, I say, if I'm emailing you at 11 p.m. at night, it's because that's how I'm making my work-life balance work with 2 little children. That doesn't mean I expect a response. But it's equally fair for somebody who's just starting to say, hey, I saw that email from you late at night last night. Were you expecting me to respond then? Or how do I know what to expect? So if I haven't had a chance to give my little spiel about my work-life balance doesn't need to look like yours, then it's a reminder that I need to do that.
So I think, Mary, you've made some changes, obviously, in your career. Any thoughts on how that might have happened in a pandemic, in a virtual setting?
Well, funny you should ask that question, because I officially am leaving the U.S. Department of Labor next Friday, and I'm starting a new job with a law firm.
Yay! Congratulations!
Thank you. And so, when you look around and you see that there is no opportunity for advancement, and you still have a lot to give, and you still have goals that you haven't achieved, then you really need to start looking to fulfill whatever your dreams are. One thing that helped me was, as a part of our advisory council, we were asked to come up with 6 words that defined just how we were feeling or what was going on with us while we were being sheltered at home. And what I came up with was, sheltering in place resulted in clarity. And what the clarity that it gave me was that there is no more room for opportunity in this job where I've been for 19 years. And what does the next step look like for me? And out of the blue, I received a call from a former colleague. Actually, she was co-counsel, or she was opposing counsel on a case. And she asked, would you ever consider leaving the Department of Labor? And I said, yeah. And so that was, it just kind of took a few months. And then, so now I'm at the place where I have given notice and I'm moving on. But a lot of it had to do with recognizing no opportunity for advancement. So you're the master of your fate, the captain of your ship, and your career is self-directed. And so you can't rely on anybody else to help shepherd you where you want to go. You have to take the bull by the horns, and you have to be in charge of your career at every turn and make your plan. And if you start running into resistance, or perhaps there are people, maybe there's a regime change, which has kind of happened in the Department of Labor. And I knew a couple of years ago, this is not, doesn't look too good for me. So you've got to keep your eyes and ears open. You've got to have a plan, and you've got to execute your plan. So that's my 2 cents.
You are inspiring. Congratulations. I am
Thank
so
you.
excited for you. That is
Thank you.
phenomenal.
Thanks.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. And I know there's so much more we would all love to share. And no question, there are lots more questions. So I'm curious if each of you, I think I know the answer, if each of you would be willing to have your contact information shared. I know an email will go out following our time together. Additionally, we're going to provide all kinds of resources, both from a mental health perspective, as well as career coaching, interviewing, all kinds of good stuff. Would you be willing to have all your contact information shared? Because I have a hunch there are some folks who would like to have more conversation, and they want to build their Bobcat network, right? So awesome. I had a feeling the answer would be yes.
So I'm going to say, can you share LinkedIn contact information? Because this is me thinking about boundaries, and the fact that my Gmail is absurd and my work email is at least as bad, but I have been able to have people connect with me on LinkedIn and chat via that way. So I think maybe we can each sort of let you know what would work most in terms of us intaking that information.
But also what's great about LinkedIn is they then can see our network, and they can maybe get some connections that way. So.
Probably better anyway.
Brilliant, brilliant.
I think that would be a great idea, Laura, if you could maybe just check in and see which mode would be best for us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Different people like different things, right? And I think, yes.
Well, I have personally learned a lot from our conversation tonight, so I want to thank all of you. I knew how awesome you were, but I'm so happy that everyone else who joined us tonight got to see how awesome all of you are. So I want to say thank you to each of you. Thank you to everyone who came this evening. You have lots of choices of what you might be doing, and you chose to spend your evening with us. So we want to say thank you. And a huge, huge thank you to John Rogers and Colleen Caro from the Ohio University Alumni Association. And of course, we want to say a big, big thank you to Dr. Lynn Harder. We love her. I know everyone does. And, we just want to say we're all, kind of experiencing this crazy, unusual, challenging time together. And it's really a great opportunity to, kind of take a moment and realize that we do have a support system. We've got each other. We're all Bobcats helping Bobcats. And please, please, please reach out to us. We're excited to continue to help you and support you and offer guidance. So thank you all very much. Look for some good resources to come, and we're going to sign off. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.